Hi, welcome to part 2 of the Orthodox defense. I really didn't get into the Orthodox defense. I spent the last lecture talking about some basic concepts and the moves leading up to the Orthodox defense, which actually leads into two other defenses I want to talk about. And where I ended up was, and I'm just going to play through the moves again for those just starting with this video, are d4, d5, c4, e6, knight c3, knight f6, bishop g5, bishop e7, e3, black castles, knight f3. So this is where my last video left off, and I explained the moves up to here. And then now I want to talk about the Orthodox defense, which is the move knight to b the d7. And maybe I should just point out, which I've already mentioned in the last video, that the Orthodox defense is known as a solid defense for black, somewhat drawish, known as black has to sort of suffer for a while just to sort of get an equal game. And black's main idea is to exchange some of the minor pieces to free his game. So it isn't like some of the other defenses. They may look for piece activity at the cost of a pawn. Here the Orthodox defense says, I'm going to try to keep a very solid pawn structure, a very solid game, and exchange pieces to get a better, or to free my game and get an equal game. So the Orthodox defense actually starts by knight on b to d7. So why play knight on b to d7? Well, if you don't know, black also plans to play c6 supporting the d pawn. So the knight doesn't want to go there. And anyways, if you look at it, if the knight was sitting here, where would it be? The next moves it could go would be, sort of like here. Those are sort of like the critical squares, and I don't know, it doesn't really do anything. If you look at the red squares, not too much, not too active in my opinion, and also sort of blocks, if the knight was here, sort of blocks the movement of the c pawn, which is critical. So it makes logical sense that the knight is developed to this square. Where it also helps, with the knight here, look at the other squares, or look at I call them sort of the key squares. Here it helps support this knight. It helps, defend e5, or it can maybe later push the pawn up. Helps defend c5, and it can move to b6. So, sort of makes more logical sense to put the knight there. So then, white's next move is usually rook to c1. White is moving its rook to the file which is most logical to be opened. And once again, you're saying, well, why don't we move the bishop to here? That's where it wants to go. Well, as you'll see this, the reason why is that black will just make white waste time. So rook to c1, logical, because white is putting the rook where this pawn is going to be exchanged, and then white will have, or there'll be an open file. As I said before, then black will usually play a pawn to c6, supporting d5. Black has a very solid pawn structure. Sort of the goal of the Orthodox, something very solid, and it plans to exchange off some pieces. Okay, now it's white's move, and the most common move is bishop to d3. It wants to complete its development, and I covered that. Now the bishop eyes this pawn, attacking on the king's side, but it did delay this move because of black's next move. Black usually now plays d takes c4, and now white is going to have to waste a move, capturing this pawn. So the next move by white, white's ninth move, is bishop takes c4, and it's black's move. Almost now black has somewhat gained what's called the initiative. If you think about it, the chess game sort of ebbs and flows. One person is sort of like seems to be at the forefront of making the moves, where they're initiating the threats. And with now where white had to make that waste move, black sort of now seizes this initiative, in my opinion, where it sort of now starts to control the flow of the game just a tad. So bishop takes c4, so white just played, and now besides d5, if I get the time at the end of this lecture. So why did black play knight to d5? Well, it goes along with its strategy. Now look at it. It looks like several pieces are going to be exchanged, and that's part of black's goal. He's, if you look at it, black is sort of all pinned up behind here, and one of the ways to get yourself sort of out of a cramped position is to exchange some pieces, and d5 not only centralizes the knight, bringing it to the center, but it also sets up for some piece exchanges. And now white usually plays bishop takes e7, then queen takes e7, natural reply. And now you're saying, well, what should white play in this position? Shouldn't we capture the knight? But if you capture the knight, if you think about it, if any one of these pieces capture, it doesn't matter. Let's just say the knight took, as an example. Black's going to recapture here, and this will actually free this bishop, which is exactly what black wanted. Black would have freed his game and freed his bishop, and black would have a pretty good game. And also, this open file here, I don't want to call it dead, but it's, not right now. It isn't too productive for white, as I call it. So white is just going to, remember I said control the center, develop your pieces, castle. White is going to generally castle in this position, and now black will carry out its sort of main theme of exchanging pieces. It will take the knight on c3, and then the best capture is with the pawn, capturing towards the center with the pawn. And then the counter strike, the last move from black, and where I'll leave this line, is black plays e5, striking at the center and freeing his bishop. So if you can see, this pawn now threatens to capture this pawn. Obviously white doesn't want to recapture it, because it will leave this pawn isolated. So now black is striking at the center for central control, and it's freeing this bishop here. And I'll leave that line there. I got about 2 minutes left on this lecture. I just want to maybe back up to where I said I'd try to cover another variation, and I'll back up to there. It's where black played knight to d5. So instead of playing knight to d5, black could play b6. And now black's idea with b6 is to play the bishop here and down this line, because the white king is going to castle kingside. And here's just a few moves until I run out of time on this line. Generally, white will castle. It's the only thing left to do. It's developed its pieces. It's sort of got central control. Black will play bishop to b7. And now white will generally play the queen to e2. The reason why is white wants to push this pawn to e4, so the queen is going to help support the pawn push to e4, and also now this rook can actually slide to wherever it needs to go, maybe the d1. So that's the reason for queen to e2. Now black usually continues with its normal plan on the Orthodox, which is knight to d5, and then just like the last line, trade, bishop takes e7, queen takes e7, and now white will push e4. And then now, once again, black continues its plan of sort of exchanging some pieces. And I'm going to have to leave it there. Okay, now I'll move on to the next lecture and to the next defense.